The first transit that we are talking about is Venus entering Gemini on July 4th at 11:31 a.m. Eastern Time. Venus represents love, relationships, peace, harmony, balance, beauty. And Gemini is the researcher, teacher, intellectual, chatty, gossip, and also contrarian. So wanting to understand or bring up multiple sides. And Venus entering on July 4th will be in Gemini until July 30th. So pretty much July. We can think about it more simply. For the rest of the month, it will be in this one sign. And as a result, we can expect a shift in our desire, Venus, to bring comfort, calm, peace, and balance to the Gemini area of our chart. So whenever Venus is moving through, it's like, okay, how can we not create order, but how can we balance? How can we make this more pleasurable and just like a better experience for us? And that is in contrast, I'll say, when we have Mercury moving through a sign, it's okay, well, I'm thinking about this, I'm talking about this. So Venus is bringing a different energy. We may be taking action, but it's not Mars changing signs, which is I have to do things now. It's, how can we just make this more enjoyable, whatever this area of life is. And I'll also note here, just in the context of this conversation, approximately this time last month, at the beginning of June, we had Jupiter had been in Gemini for an entire year. While Jupiter has moved into Cancer, we have other planets that are coming in on its tails and entering Gemini and are going to be having a foothold there. Donna, I have Gemini Venus. Okay, so that means that you would have your Venus return, which happens at kind of an irregular cadence because it depends on what's happening with the cycle, because you don't necessarily have one of those every single year. Depending on what's going on with the retrogrades, it could be spaced out more. So I wouldn't I wouldn't feel necessarily too dizzied about it because Venus is a benefic planet. It wants to bring us joy and ease and comfort. So I would expect that when it goes exact, as in when this transiting Venus meets up with the specific degree point of your natal Venus, that you could have a pretty good time or relaxing time. So you can search using the transit tool as an example in AstroSeek to find the specific date in there. And because there's no retrograde, it's just going to hit it once and then it's going to keep going and then move on to the next sign. So you can just mark that exact date and then maybe the few days before and after as it gets in the orb. So you could do 5 degrees before, 5 degrees after, or 3 if you want to have it a tighter orb. For the 7th house, relationships, exactly. And to keep this in mind, Gemini is an air sign. It's very people focused. It wants to talk. It wants to connect to people. Venus, also about relationships. So you have like a triple whammy of it's really, really heavy in this area of life. So it's possible that maybe you have this as an arc in your life overall of relationships and relationship building and communication in your relationships being so, so important because all of these 3 archetypes are very tightly intertwined. So yeah, it could mean that ease in your communication and dynamics in your relationships kind of happening, you know. And that would be what you could look out for. Maybe things are just going really smoothly. Or if you're not in a relationship, it could be supporting, connecting with one, bonding, yada, yada. Nancy says 11th and 12th. So this would suggest that Venus is trying to bring more ease, especially to relationships. When we're talking about the 11th house, that's friends, networking, connecting with other people. So how can we get along better? How can we foster more relationships, create more balance in the relationships we have with friends, with our community? How can we get along better? And then as it moves over into that 12th house, it's bringing that peace, that joy, that beauty to yourself. It's your soul work. It's the very deep introspection and reflection. So you're starting with others, how you are in a group, who you are connecting with, and then really, really looking inward and tending to yourself. So again, Venus moving through anywhere, relatively supportive transit, similar with Jupiter. It's okay, what can we do here that will make us feel better? Really. Misty for 8th house. So 8th house is about mental health, shared resources, so joint resources, inheritance, so receiving resources, money, assets from other people, as well as ideas of death, rebirth, and transformation. So this is a very, like the 12th house, very weighty area. And to have Venus go through there could feel like a breath of fresh air, like things that you have been stewing on or that have felt particularly heavy, challenging. Venus is coming through like, like trying to make it a little bit easier, a little bit smoother. So hopefully, again, with these in particular very notoriously tough house areas, it'll feel like a big gift to go through these spaces. Many of the other houses have neutral or positive connotations, but the 8th and the 12th have very negative connotations. It doesn't mean that they're negative. It's just that they're kind of intimidating. So when we have Venus or Jupiter moving through them, it's like, oh, okay, we can have something happening here that will feel not necessarily productive, but feel supportive. 2nd house with Mars. So, okay, what you're going to want to pay attention to is what degree do you have Mars at? And you can use the same calculator I mentioned before to see what day is Venus going to be passing over it, because that'll be a point of interest for you. It would suggest that on that day or right around then, your action, your drive, and motivation will align with wanting to create peace and ease, support, etc. So it will align your actions with your values in essence. And when you have it in the 2nd house, that is one of the major themes is what are your principles? What are your values? What do you find important? How do you earn money? So it could be finance related. Venus sometimes can have an association with that as well because it's a ruler of Taurus and Taurus has some financial links to it. So you could have some action taken, some ease in how you are earning money, how you are reassessing your self-worth, taking action towards investing in yourself. Lots of different iterations, especially when it hits that natal Mars. Lolo for the 9th house. For 9th house, we are talking about learning, teaching, travel, as in long distance travel, reading books, taking a class, understanding other cultures, things that are way outside of your comfort zone and your immediate surroundings. So when you have Venus moving through there, it's again just very supportive. So if you are studying or learning something, maybe it is coming quicker to you, maybe it's a little bit easier, or you're feeling, I wouldn't say more inspired because that probably would be if Mars was moving through, you're like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn, I'm going to study. But it could feel more like it's clicking and it's sticking, whatever it is that's coming out for you. Like, wow, that really resonates. And the same thing could happen if you were teaching or you were sharing information with other people, writing, publishing, etc. That it feels like it's just you're in flow. That's more of the vibe. We're connecting to ourselves, our inner peace. We're connecting with others. We're creating balance. We're trying to have flow and joy. And what a fortunate thing for us, given that as I get into the rest of these transits, you're going to hear that this is really nice, that we have some part of our chart feeling happy all July long, because there's a lot going on this month that doesn't carry as pleasing and soothing a connotation. Neptune is stationing retrograde in Aries, also on July 4th. And this is happening at 5:34 p.m. Eastern Time. Because Neptune is an outer planet, it moves very slowly. It's only at 1 degree. So I'll back this up and give us a little bit more context, but first I'll just explain what each of the archetypes represent. Neptune is the planet of dreams, delusion. How are we deluding ourselves? So you can see the connection with dreams. Illusion and deception. So how are we deluding ourselves? How are we deluding others? What is it that we think is real? What do we believe? What is it that we are dreaming about? It's also very intuitive. So you could have very interesting, noteworthy dreams, as an example. And Aries represents action, courage, competition, passion, independence. And Neptune first entered Aries back in March, on March 30th. So what we've been living in since the very, very end of March for the last 3 months is the preview period for the next many years of Neptune being in Aries. So this was the second outer planet in the last 12 months to change signs. The first was Pluto, which happened November 2024. Neptune was next. And then now I'll be talking about other planets changing signs, some of which has followed since. So for historical context in understanding what it means to have Neptune in Aries, it's a little bit tricky to look around right now because so many things have been happening and we have so many different planets changing signs and then all these retrogrades happening that, were happening in March, and then we have others that are coming this month. So it's a little bit hard to parse out what is the root, if you will. So if we look back in history, what Neptune in Aries has typically coincided with is cultural shifts and revolution. Now you might say, I thought Uranus was revolution. Yes. However, this pattern of Neptune in Aries, a sign of action. So it's like you're dreaming up action. You're making that dream into a reality. It's also coincided, interestingly enough, with the end of empires. So the fall of certain empires over the course of history. And similarly, wartime. So for an empire to fall, oftentimes it's a result of a war happening, a battle happening, somebody different taking power. And on the more uplifting side, it has coincided with pioneering in the health sciences and spiritual domains. So it's creating things that are new, that are maybe outside the box, that are dismantling a little bit, kind of Aquarian energy, interestingly enough. So that is what the backdrop is. And if you want to look back, if you want to think about the last few months since March 30th, there is a little bit of that going around, I would say. See if you agree. And I want to just quickly rattle off the timeline here. This is taking us into next year, but so we can have a concept on how big and slow this is. So Neptune first entered Aries March 30th, a few months ago. Stationing retrograde July 4th. Then it will be slowly moving backward from the first degree of Aries, backing up into Pisces. It re-enters Pisces in October on the 22nd. Then it will station direct December 10th. So as you can see, this one retrograde, it's already carrying us to the end of the year. It's stationing retrograde July 4th and stationing direct on December 10th. That's rest of 2025. By the time it re-enters Aries, it's late January, January 26, 2026. So this is a long period of time. And for retrogrades, we're always talking about a reflection. And not only are we reflecting in general on what's our sense of reality, how are we deluding ourselves and others, what's real or not real, but we are dipping back and forth between these two areas of life, between these two energies, Pisces and Aries. So we're having that last leg of Neptune in Pisces that's going from October 22nd to January 26th. A significant chunk of time, several months' time, that will be the last that any of us will ever be alive that it is in that sign. So we've had this preview period of it in the next sign, and then we'll have that last leg of, okay, well, what's going to happen? What's the last lessons that we have to learn about Neptune in Pisces? So it was early February 2012 to end of March 2025. So 13 years that it was in this same sign. So this is a really big chapter of life. And we'll have the few months this fall to put the close and have the button on that chapter. So not only in this retrograde can you reflect on the general themes for the collective, the area of your chart, you can look back at that entire 13-year period. What's been happening in this period of time? How can I use that knowledge to learn the lessons that I need to move forward as we lock in January 2026 into this chapter that we've been previewing for the last few months. Reminder here that with Neptune, it moves very slowly. And these outer planets all pretty much retrograde for half the year, every year. And that's part of why it also takes forever for them to get through into the next sign. So we can take the retrograde with a little bit of a grain of salt because it's not as exciting. It happens all the time. We're half in, we're half out. The thing that's different about this retrograde is the fact that it's getting us back to the closing chapter. We are ending the cycle of Neptune and Pisces, never to happen again while we are alive. So it's ushering in that closure. So it's supercharged reflection because we're looking back at 13 years worth of our lives, plus the few months in the fall and early winter time. What is your understanding of kind of your action, your drive as relates to how you're learning, what you're teaching, how you're expanding? And I think it's interesting to pair Neptune with the ninth house, knowing that it's part of how we shape what we believe. And the ninth house can also contain your belief system and spirituality. So there is a bit of an intersection there. So how are we feeling that? How are we acting upon it? How are we manifesting that? And again, for all of these, we want to look back to at Pisces. So those probably like last degree, basically, very, very end of Pisces. You know, what's happening in both of them, because we're reflecting on these last few months in 2025 with the Aries portion of those first 2 degrees. But then when we keep going, we're back in Pisces, we're reflecting on a 13-year period. 11th house for Stephanie. What really is true community for you? True, authentic connection with other people? What's really your place in those environments? What are the tools that you've been using, and have they been effective? Have they actually been serving and supporting you? So you'll want to look at where you have Jupiter and your North Node, because if it's not within the first degree or so of Aries, and it's not in the last degree or so of Pisces, then, and they're not, 5 degrees out, they're going to be out of range, so they wouldn't be picked up. So if we're talking about 6 or 5 degrees of Aries or less, and then 24 degrees of Pisces or more. If it's not within that range, then kind of out of the conversation. So it would just be focusing really on what's the energy of Neptune, what's the point of a retrograde, reflection, healing, understanding, especially when we're talking about Neptune. It's like, okay, well, what does this mean? We have a lot of that going on. And then also pulling in Aries of action and who we are as independent people. And then Pisces, which is echoing a lot of the themes of intuition and creativity. My Lilith is at 2 degrees of Aries. Aries is in my 6th house. So I don't usually talk about Lilith all that much, but my understanding on the high level is that Lilith is kind of an independent. I also have Lilith in Aries. And so it's kind of how you are wanting to maybe maintain that sense of independence. And so if you have that being kicked up a little bit, I think that's what's interesting. So it will be run over. So Neptune has not reached 2 degrees yet. You're still in the orb, so it's still picking it up. So you could kind of see how you've been feeling since March 30th. How have you been shifting your understanding and your perception of independence, as well as, of course, the 6th house, which is having to do with your work-life balance, your work ethic. So what are you doing for work? What are you giving and offering that is allowing you to maintain independence, while also taking action? And then you have health in there as well as pets. And by health, I mean physical health.